Good evening. In Chapter 1, we learned that the population of the human race is exploding. In fact, the rate is increasing so much, we're in danger of possibly exceeding the ability of the planet Earth to support us. And that if we don't do something about either controlling the rate of our population increase and or assuring that the planet can somehow keep up with our needs, we may very well become extinct. We call this issue sustainability. What is it that we need to do in order to make sure that the human race does not use up its resources faster than the planet can sustain them? But how does the planet produce resources? That's the topic of Chapter 3. What we're going to learn in Chapter 3 is how organisms interact with their environment and how this contributes to sustainability. We'll look at what is called the hierarchy of ecology, where we start out with very simple things such as individual cells, which then can combine to form larger systems, which we call organs, which combine into larger systems, which we call living beings. The living beings interact with each other in communities. These larger communities interact with bigger systems, and which we call ecosystems. These ecosystems interact with biomi, which are even larger systems, which eventually interact with the entire planet. In other words, all living things interact together to either support or take away from all other living things. The key to sustainability is making sure that all living things cooperate together to support each other and to make sure that we all have a future. We will see that the basic unit of sustainability is something called the ecosystem. The ecosystem is a complex interaction between the living and the non-living or abiotic factors within a given area. We'll see that ecosystems evolve from two simple abiotic conditions, namely rainfall and temperature, and that these two abiotic factors give rise to the type of plants, and in turn the type of animals that feed on them, and in turn the type of animals that feed on those animals within a given ecosystem. The development of the ecosystem and the kinds of organisms that occupy the ecosystem is controlled by, first of all, environmental factors. As I said, temperature and rainfall are two of the most important ones. They not only control how an ecosystem develops, but they also control how well it develops. And we can see that in this graph accompanying my narration. This graph attempts to show what happens when the temperature varies from very cold to very high for a set of plants that are growing. We see that when the temperature is in an optimal range, that we get optimum growth of the plants. If we go beyond that optimal range, either too hot or too cold, then you have less than optimal growth conditions and you have less growth, less plants. So environmental factors create both optimums as well as zones of stress that prevent an optimal growth. And if you go beyond these zones of stress, you exceed the limits of tolerance, which determines whether or not any growth at all will occur. So ecosystems are constrained by their abiotic factors, and the ecosystem in turn then is limited in its ability to provide resources, specifically food, for the rest of the participants and occupants of that ecosystem. So we see then that ecosystems, in order to support the living or biotic components of the ecosystem, must draw on the non-living or abiotic components of its environment in order to support those living systems. And there are, in fact, three major, what we call spheres, that provide the abiotic materials necessary for an ecosystem to sustain life. The first sphere is the atmosphere, which provides all the necessary gases for life. The second sphere is called the hydrosphere, which provides water. And the last sphere is called the lithosphere, which provides all the minerals and other elements that are necessary for sustaining life. From these three spheres, the ecosystem is able to provide the necessary nutrients in order to create and sustain life within its ecosystem. So then, how does an ecosystem take these abiotic materials from the various spheres that it has and from them produce the food necessary to sustain all the living things within the ecosystem? Well, the key to this is a process called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is carried out by all green plants that contain organelles known as chloroplasts, in which there is chlorophyll. These chloroplasts, utilizing the chlorophyll, are able to take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and water from the lithosphere, and in the presence of energy provided by the sun, create the most basic of food molecules, known as glucose. Within the chemical bonds of this glucose is the energy to sustain life and to build new organic tissue. The plant itself will utilize these organic molecules in a process called respiration. In respiration, the glucose's bonds are broken down to liberate energy to keep the plant alive and at the same time produce carbon dioxide and water as waste products, which it gives off into the atmosphere. The energy that a plant does not use in order to keep itself alive, it uses to build plant tissue. Then when herbivores, that is, animals that eat plants, come along and eat the plant tissue, they are absorbing the glucose that the plant has produced. And that then is food for the animals. And they will take the glucose that's in the tissues of the plants that they've eaten and break it down and liberate the energy to keep their cells alive. And the excess energy is used to build tissue in the animal, or meat. This meat then is consumed by the next higher organism in the food chain, and so on. In this way, then, the ecosystem is able to create the basic energy of food that sustains all of the living organisms within its ecosystem. But producing food through the process of photosynthesis is only one of the two important things that ecosystems do to maintain sustainability. The other important function of an ecosystem is to recycle matter so that it can be reused, produce more food. Because if ecosystems were not able to recycle the matter that is used to sustain life, then eventually we would use that matter up and there'd be no more to produce food. By recycling matter, ecosystems are able to maintain sustainability through the continuous process of continuously producing food. In this chapter, we're going to look at how ecosystems recycle three important elements: carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. In particular, we're going to look at the carbon cycle. Carbon, in the form of carbon dioxide, is produced as a result of cellular respiration. That is the breakdown of the glucose produced by photosynthesis. That respiration then liberates carbon from the breakdown of glucose as carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. In the atmosphere, the carbon dioxide can be reabsorbed by green plants and then utilized to make new glucose, that is, new food. Or it can be absorbed by the oceans and utilized by aquatic creatures. Or when living organisms die, they can decompose, and through the processes that we'll talk about later, those components can be broken down by decomposers such as fungi and earthworms and bacteria and other things, and the carbon liberated in that decomposition process can be recaptured and recycled into materials that can be made into food. So we see that the recycling of elements such as carbon dioxide our elements such as carbon through such molecules as carbon dioxide is extremely important. The other aspect that we will talk about in the chapter is the human impact on some of these cycles. As you're probably aware, the humanity has been utilizing the consumption of fossil fuels through transportation and the production of power, and in so doing, filling up the atmosphere with a lot more carbon dioxide than normally would be there. That carbon dioxide is producing a greenhouse effect that is affecting the ability of ecosystems to function properly. So, as we will see throughout this course, the very presence of man and his ability to manipulate his environment is having an impact on the various various processes that have been developed through evolution to help keep ecosystems functioning and help keep animals and other living things alive on this planet. We will constantly visit this theme of human impact on various naturally evolved systems and how both have we screwed it up, but also how it is that we might be able to stop screwing it up and maybe help improve it. The other thing that ecosystems do that is quite important is they help to detoxify molecules. That is, many molecules that, if they were to build up in great concentration, could actually be harmful to various living things within an ecosystem. But by breaking them down through the various processes that are used to recycle nutrients, the harmful effects of these toxic materials is avoided. So we see then that ecosystems play the key role in maintaining the sustainability of all life on our planet, beginning with its ability to produce organic matter as a result of photosynthesis, which utilizes abiotic materials from the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the lithosphere, and in the presence of light, which is energy output from our sun, converts it into food. That food then is consumed first by herbivores and then working our way up through the food chain, carnivores and those that feed on the carnivores. And at each step, the food, as its bonds are broken down, liberate energy to keep the animal alive, as well as to provide tissue that can be fed upon by the next higher organism in the process. As that food is broken down through the process of respiration, energy is used both for life as well as heat energy, is excess energy not utilized in any other way, is given off eventually into the universe. All of the other components, that is the matter that's involved in food, is then recycled through a number of different processes, the carbon cycle, the phosphorus cycle, the nitrogen cycle, in such a way that all the important components and nutrients necessary for life can be reutilized then by the primary producers to produce new food.